Influencer marketing can be super effective at growing and scaling a Shopify store or any e-commerce brand for that matter. However, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. We're going to share 9 different things that we see e-commerce brands doing that you need to avoid when running influencer marketing for your business. So stay away from these common traps that we see e-commerce brands make. First one, traps that we see nearly every e-commerce brand fall into is choosing influencers only based on audience size or size of their following. When it comes to working with influencers, you definitely want to include the size of their following as one of the attributes you look at, but there are lots of other things that an influencer needs to bring to the table in order for them to be a successful influencer for your influencer marketing campaign. Things like how interested they are in your brand and product, how much of a match between their audience and your target audience. That's super important. Things like being authentic and having real followers, influencers who engage with their audience. That's super important too. You want to look at things like interaction rates. There are lots of things that you want to look at besides just audience size. And so when you are looking at influencers, yes, you do want to see their following count, but it is not the end all be all. You need to look much deeper into an influencer past the number of followers they have. That is the first thing to stay away from. The second blunder we see e-commerce brands making when working with influencers is expecting results too quickly. Influencer campaigns and when influencers promote a product, it is extremely rare that they will post something about a brand, especially a new brand, and all of a sudden sales go through the roof. Instead, you need to be patient. Just like when you're running any other marketing, if you're running Google ads or Facebook ads or TikTok ads, once you start running a campaign, it takes time for results to happen. You need to do lots of testing. You need to build awareness. You need to make buyers comfortable with your brand. You need to overcome obstacles. There's a lot of steps that people need to make before they purchase. And so expecting results right away with influencer marketing is not going to yield good success for your brand. You need to be in it for the long term. You need to build relationships with real people who are interested in partnering with your brand. And you want to test just like you do with any other form of marketing. And then over time, focus more and invest more in the influencers who are getting you really good results and stop working with the ones who aren't. So that's the second thing, expecting results too quickly. Third blunder we see e-commerce brands making is not giving influencers enough time to use the product. So if you're just selling t-shirts, sure, maybe giving an influencer a week or 2 weeks to try on the product, make sure they are shooting with the right lighting in the right environment. That's a good amount of time for a product that's very easy to use. But if you are offering a product that requires any, let's say, installation, or they need to learn how it works, or they have to do work and spend effort in terms of getting the product to work in the first place, you need to give them time to do that. If you're asking influencers to create a shoot with lots of other people in it, or even a few other people, they need time to organize that. So you need to make sure you're accounting for that when you're building out your campaign brief, so that you're giving influencers the amount of time they need to create the content that you want. If you rush them, you're not going to get the best type of content and influence from those people as you could. Next up is do not be too controlling. That is the fourth tip and the fourth blunder that we see brands making, is being too controlling. Influencers have gained influence with their audience because they understand how to create content, they understand their audience, and they've built up a good relationship with them, the good influencers, the real influencers. So when you are asking them to create content for your brand, yes, you should give them direction and give them guidance, but don't be too controlling. Every step of the way, don't dictate exactly what needs to happen, because otherwise you're going to turn those influencers off, they're going to shut down, and you're not going to allow them to do the really cool stuff that they do. So don't be too controlling. Fifth thing that we see marketers do or e-commerce brands do that you want to avoid when working with influencers is not working with enough influencers. Do not expect that you can work with a handful of influencers and all of a sudden your brand is going to take off. Now, you may be able to get some really good assets, you may be able to get some really good content, you may be able to build up a little bit of awareness, but in order to make a big impact, you typically will need to work with lots of influencers. And once again, we never know how an influencer is going to perform until we actually go live and launch with them. Once we test and they start getting out in the marketplace and we see what the engagement is like, then we can do follow-up interactions with those influencers. But right out of the gate, you don't want to just work with a few influencers. It's going to be too few. You need to test lots of different people, ideally across multiple different platforms, in order to get good results. The number 6 blunder we see e-commerce brands make with influencers is not communicating enough. So at every step of the path, you need to be in touch with influencers. Otherwise, they could fall off and they might forget about your brand or the campaign. So everything from at the front end of the campaign, when you are doing outreach to them, getting them excited about the brand, negotiating, all that stuff, lots of brands will typically stay in touch with. But then do not fall off when it comes to implementation. You need to communicate things like, when is the product going to be shipped to them? When they receive the product, confirm that. If there's any shipping delays, over communicate that. Communicate about when they are going to shoot the content, what type of content they're going to create. Make sure you have expectations on when you expect to have that content. Keep an open dialogue so that if there's any problems, they're telling you ahead of time. Influencers are people. They get sick. They go on vacation. People in their family might get hurt. All of that stuff has happened with our brands. So there are unexpected things that can happen with influencers. You need to roll with it a little bit, but you also need to make sure that you're communicating so you understand when that stuff happens. The 7th blunder that we see influencers make is not giving creative guidelines. So although you do want to give some leeway with content creators and influencers to make sure they're leveraging their skill set to create really good content, you don't want to let them just kind of run off into the wild and do whatever they want. Give them guidelines. If you want them to mention your brand in a video, say that. If you want them to use your product a certain way, say that. Give them guidance as to how you want the content being used. Perhaps you want to take that content and run it as a Facebook ad or as an Instagram ad. Do you want vertical? Do you want landscape? You need to communicate all that stuff. Maybe you want to turn it into a compilation video for one of your product pages. So the more guidance you can give them, the better off they will be able to create the content that is in line with what you're looking for. The number 8th problem that we see brands making when it comes to influencers is not offering fair payment. We've seen it time and time again where brands will want to work with an influencer. They'll say they want to work with a really big influencer or a really big micro influencer, and they're super excited to work with them, but then they just want to send them product and that's it. Well, the days of just sending product in exchange for influencer posts and content are pretty much gone unless you have a very expensive, high value product that is in demand. In some cases, we can still leverage product in exchange for content, but for the most part, we need to pay influencers and we need to pay them competitively. Otherwise, other brands will pay them properly and your campaign will fall off and you will not get the priority that you want or the content that you need. So make sure you're paying influencers appropriately. The ninth blunder we see brands make with influencer marketing is not seeing warning signs and red flags at the beginning of a relationship with an influencer. So once again, just like influencers I mentioned are people, we're all humans. Some influencers, it's like anything. Some influencers are incredibly professional. They will over communicate. They will create amazing content. They will get your brand in front of their audience and things are extremely successful. Other influencers might not be. And you want to find that out very quickly on in the relationship. When you are first communicating with influencers, look for warning signs like, are they taking a long time to respond to you? Are they not getting back to you when you're asking questions? Are they not giving you all the information you need? Are they not excited about working with your brand? There's a lot of things early on in the campaign that after you do this for a while, you'll start to pick up some red flags. Do not ignore them. If an influencer is not treating you properly at the beginning of a campaign, before you sign an agreement, do not ignore that and find another influencer. My message to influencers would be the same thing for brands. If you're working with a brand, they're not getting back to you, they're not offering fair payment, they're being wishy-washy with the info, don't work with that brand. There are tons of brands who are excited to work with influencers. So it works both ways. So there you have it, 9 blunders to avoid for influencer marketing. Influencer marketing can be extremely valuable for Shopify brands and any e-commerce brand. You need to do it the right way though. Avoid these 9 mistakes that we see e-commerce brands make, and you can be very successful with your influencer marketing efforts. Best of luck and go get them.